Listen to me. Right now, while you're sitting there safe in your room, someone just took their last breath underwater. Every single hour, 2 people die in the ocean. But drowning is not the worst thing that can happen to you in the water. Not even close. What I'm about to tell you will change how you see the beach forever. These are not made-up stories. These things really happen to real people. People who went to the beach to have fun. People who thought they were safe. People who came back different. Or didn't come back at all. Story 1. The Thing in the Tide Pools. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was 28 years old. She was studying ocean animals at a big college in Texas. She was smart, really smart. She knew everything about the ocean. She knew about sharks. She knew about jellyfish. She knew what was dangerous and what was safe. At least she thought she did. It was July 15th, 2019. The summer in Texas was very hot that year. We're talking about 100 degrees even in the shade. It was so hot that the roads were melting. People were staying inside with their air conditioners on full blast. But Sarah had work to do. She needed to collect water samples from the beach for her school project. She was studying the little pools of water that form in the rocks when the ocean goes out. We call them tide pools. Sarah drove to Port Aransas Beach very early in the morning. She got there at exactly 5:47. I know the exact time because she wrote it down in her notebook. The police found that notebook later. The beach was completely empty. Not a single person anywhere. Just Sarah, the sunrise, and the sound of birds. She liked being alone on the beach. It made her feel peaceful. It made her feel safe. Big mistake. She walked to the rocky part of the beach where the tide pools form. The ocean had gone out about an hour before she got there. This left dozens of little pools of water trapped in the rocks, perfect for her to study. She started working right away, taking pictures, collecting water in little jars, writing notes about everything she saw. For the first hour, everything was normal. Everything was fine. Then she found the cave. It wasn't really a cave. It was more like a deep hole in the rocks that the ocean had made. The opening was about 3 feet high and 4 feet wide, not very big. But when Sarah looked inside with her flashlight, she could see a pool of water in there. A big pool, much bigger than the other ones she had been studying. This pool was different. The water in the other pools was clear. You could see right to the bottom. But the water in this pool was dark, almost black, and it was moving. The water was spinning slowly in circles even though there was no wind. Even though nothing was making it move, Sarah felt scared. She wrote in her notebook that something felt wrong about this pool. She wrote that the water was much colder than the other pools. At least 10 degrees colder. She also wrote about the smell. It smelled like dead fish, but worse. Much worse. Like something that had been rotting for a very long time. But Sarah was curious. She wanted to know what was in that dark water. She wanted to understand why it was different. So she crawled into the cave with her flashlight and her equipment. She had to get on her hands and knees to fit through the opening. The rocks were wet and slimy. They felt wrong under her hands. Inside the cave, the pool was about 6 feet across. It was deep. So deep that her flashlight couldn't reach the bottom. The water kept spinning in that slow circle, around and around and around, like something underneath was stirring it, like something was alive down there. Sarah took out one of her glass jars. She reached down to scoop up some water. That's when it happened. Something grabbed her wrist. At first, she thought it was seaweed. Just some plants floating in the water. But seaweed doesn't grab you. Seaweed doesn't wrap around your arm and pull. Seaweed doesn't have strength. The thing holding her wrist was not a plant. It was not any animal she had ever studied. It was like a thick rope made of muscle, as thick as her thumb. It was covered in little suckers like an octopus has, but different. These suckers had teeth, tiny teeth that bit into her skin. And it was cold, so cold that it burned. Sarah tried to pull her arm back, but the thing was too strong. Then more of them came up from the water. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They were all reaching for her, grabbing at her arms, her legs, her clothes. They were trying to pull her into that dark water. Sarah screamed. She screamed as loud as she could, but no one heard her. The beach was empty. She was alone. The things kept pulling. Her knees were at the edge of the pool now. She could feel the water. It didn't feel like normal water. It was thick like oil, and it was moving. The water itself was alive. Sarah remembered she had a knife, a small knife she used for her work. It was in her bag. She grabbed it with her free hand and started cutting at the things holding her. When she cut them, they didn't bleed red blood. Something black came out, something that smelled so bad she almost threw up. It smelled like every dead thing in the ocean all at once. But cutting them worked. They let go. Sarah crawled backward as fast as she could. She fell on the rocks. She cut her hands and knees. There was blood everywhere. But she didn't care. She ran. She left all her equipment behind. She left her notebook, her samples, everything. She ran to her car and drove straight to the hospital. The doctors at the hospital didn't believe her story. They thought maybe she got stung by a jellyfish, or maybe she had a bad reaction to something in the water, but they couldn't explain the marks on her arms and legs. Perfect circles where those things had grabbed her. The circles wouldn't heal right. They stayed open and wet for weeks. Clear liquid kept coming out of them, liquid that smelled like the ocean. But here's the part that still scares me. 3 days after Sarah was attacked, a family went to the same beach. A mom, a dad, and their 6-year-old son named Timothy. The parents were setting up their umbrella and chairs. Timothy wandered off. Kids do that sometimes. They get curious. They want to explore. The parents looked for Timothy for hours. The police came. Search teams came. They looked everywhere. All they found were Timothy's shoes. They were sitting at the entrance to that same cave. Just his little shoes. Nothing else. The police searched the cave. They found the pool Sarah had described. But when they looked, it was just a normal pool of water, clear and shallow with a few small crabs in it. Nothing dangerous, nothing strange. They found Sarah's equipment right where she had dropped it. Her notebook was there. Her collection jars were there too. One jar was full of water, the jar Sarah had used to scoop water from the dark pool. But the water in the jar wasn't normal. Scientists looked at it. They found things in that water that shouldn't exist. Tiny creatures that only live in the deepest parts of the ocean. Places where no light ever reaches. Places where the pressure would crush a human in seconds. But these creatures were alive in that jar, swimming around like it was normal. The beach was closed for 2 weeks. Scientists came to study the cave and the pool, but they never found anything unusual. Just a normal tide pool. They never found Timothy. They never found an explanation for what happened to Sarah. But something else happened that no one talks about. Every high tide, that pool would empty out. The water would flow back to the ocean. But every low tide, it would be full again. Even though there was no way for water to get in, it would just be there, dark and cold and spinning in circles. Sarah never went back to the ocean after that day. She quit studying ocean animals. She moved to Arizona, to the desert, as far from the ocean as she could get. She studies desert plants now, but she still has nightmares. She still wakes up at night feeling those cold things wrapped around her arms. She still checks her wrists for circular marks. And sometimes in her dreams, she's back in that cave. But in her dreams, she doesn't have a knife. In her dreams, those things pull her into the dark water. And in her dreams, she sees what's at the bottom of that pool. She sees Timothy. The cave is still there today. You can go see it if you want. It's about 2 miles south of the main beach at Port Aransas. But the locals won't go near it. They know about it now. They've heard the stories. They've seen the tourists who don't listen to warnings. Some come back with marks on their skin. Some come back different, changed, wrong somehow. And some don't come back at all. If you do go, you'll see they've put up a sign now. It says, "Dangerous area, keep out." But people ignore signs. People always think they're smarter than warnings. They think bad things happen to other people, not to them. The pool is still there. Still dark. Still spinning. Still waiting. Story 2. Night swimming. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been somewhere you're not supposed to be? Somewhere that feels wrong? Like you're breaking a rule you don't understand? That's what happened to James and Lisa. They broke a rule they didn't know existed, and they paid for it. James was 32 years old. He worked with computers in New York City. He was the kind of guy who planned everything. He read reviews before buying anything. He checked the weather before going outside. He was careful. He was smart. But the ocean doesn't care how smart you are. It was August of 2020. Remember that time when everyone was stuck inside because of the virus? When we all just wanted to get out of our homes and go somewhere. Anywhere. James and his girlfriend Lisa had been trapped in their tiny apartment in Brooklyn for months. They were going crazy. They needed to escape. So they rented a beach house in Montauk, New York. It cost them $3,000 for 1 week. That was a lot of money for them. But they didn't care. They needed this. They needed to feel normal again. The house was perfect. Right on the beach. No other houses nearby. Just them, the sand, and the ocean. For 3 days, it was paradise. They swam in the ocean. They cooked good food. They read books on the deck. They were happy. Really, truly happy for the first time in months. But on the 4th night, something changed. It was August 10th. There was no moon that night. When there's no moon, the night is very dark. So dark you can't see your hand in front of your face. But the stars were beautiful. James went out on the deck around midnight to look at them. Lisa was inside reading. That's when James heard the singing. It wasn't normal singing. Have you ever heard whales sing? Those deep, sad sounds they make underwater. It was like that, but different. It sounded like people singing, but not quite people. Something pretending to be people. And it was coming from the ocean. James called Lisa to come listen. They stood together on the deck, holding hands, trying to understand what they were hearing. The singing continued. It got louder, then quieter, then louder again, like it was moving with the waves. And now they could hear words, not English, not any language they knew, but definitely words. Someone or something was singing words out there in the dark water. Then the singing stopped. Just like that, 1 second it was there, the next second it was gone. The silence was scarier than the singing. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring, the kind that makes you hold your breath without meaning to. James and Lisa stood there, frozen. They couldn't move. They couldn't speak. They just stood there waiting. But they didn't know what they were waiting for. Then they saw the lights. Far out in the water, maybe 300 feet from the beach, lights appeared. Blue and green lights under the water, not random lights. These lights were organized. They made patterns, but not patterns that made sense. Looking at them hurt your eyes, like your brain couldn't process what it was seeing. The lights started moving toward the beach. Slowly at first, then faster. As they got closer, James and Lisa could see that the lights were attached to something. Many somethings, things moving under the water. Lisa grabbed James's arm hard. We need to go inside. Right now. But James had to know what it was. He had to understand. He took out his phone and started recording. He still has that video. I've seen it. It's 47 seconds long. For the first 20 seconds, you can see the lights moving closer. Then you see them, faces, human faces under the water. But wrong, all wrong. The eyes were too far apart. The mouths were too wide. The skin was white like paper. And they were looking up at James and Lisa. All of them. Dozens of faces just under the surface, all looking up at them with those wrong eyes. Then the faces opened their mouths. And they started singing again. James and Lisa ran inside. They locked every door. They locked every window. They turned on all the lights. They called the police. But what could they say? There are things in the ocean. There are faces in the water. The police operator thought they were drunk or on drugs. She said she would send someone in the morning to check on them. They sat in the living room all night, holding each other, listening. The singing never stopped. Sometimes it was right outside their door. Sometimes it was far away. But it was always there. And sometimes they heard other sounds. Wet footsteps on the deck. Something scratching at the doors. Something tapping on the windows. Tap, tap, tap. All night long. Tap, tap, tap. When the sun finally came up, the singing stopped. James and Lisa packed their things immediately. They didn't care about losing money. They didn't care about their vacation. They just wanted to leave. But before they left, James had to look. He had to see if there was any evidence of what had happened. He went out on the deck. The deck was covered in water. Not from rain. It hadn't rained. This was ocean water. You could smell the salt. And in the water were handprints. But not normal handprints. These hands had too many fingers. Some had 6 fingers. Some had 7. Some had more. And between the fingers was skin, like the webbing on a duck's foot. There were footprints, too. But the feet that made them weren't human feet. They were too long, too wide, and they had webbing between the toes. On the glass door, pressed against it like someone had been looking inside, was the print of a face. But the face was wrong. The eyes were on the sides like a fish. The mouth went from one side to the other, and there were marks on the glass like something had been licking it. James took pictures of everything. He still has those pictures. He's shown them to scientists, to professors, to anyone who might have answers. Most people think the pictures are fake. The ones who don't think they're fake won't talk about what they think they are. But here's the worst part, the part that keeps James awake at night. When he looked at his video again at home, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. In the background, behind those faces in the water, there were more lights, hundreds of lights, thousands maybe, going out as far as the camera could see, like there was a whole city under the water, a whole civilization of those things. And they were all looking up at the beach, all watching, all waiting. James did research when he got home. He learned that Montauk has a long history of strange things happening. The Native Americans who lived there long ago had stories. Stories about things that lived in the deep water, things that looked like people but weren't people, things that came to shore on nights with no moon, things that sang songs to make people come into the water. The Native Americans knew to stay inside on those nights. They knew to ignore the singing. They knew that some things were better left alone. But we've forgotten those stories. We build houses on the beach and think we're safe. We think we own the ocean. But we don't. We never have. James and Lisa broke up 6 months later. Lisa couldn't handle the nightmares. She couldn't handle how James kept talking about what they saw. She wanted to forget. She wanted to pretend it never happened. But James can't forget. How can you forget something like that? He knows they're still out there. On nights with no moon, they come to shore. They sing their songs. They look for people to take back with them, back to whatever city they have under the water. James lives in Colorado now, in the mountains, as far from the ocean as he could get. But even there he has problems. On quiet nights he hears singing, not with his ears but in his head, in his bones. The song is calling him. It wants him to come back. It wants him to walk into the water and join them. He won't go back. He tells himself he won't. But the song gets stronger every year, and sometimes, in his dreams, he's back on that beach. In his dreams, he walks into the water. In his dreams, the faces smile at him with their 2 wide mouths, and in his dreams it feels good. It feels like coming home. Story 3. The Beach That Shouldn't Exist. Have you ever gotten lost? I mean really lost? Not just turned around, but lost in a way that doesn't make sense? Where you know where you are, but the place you are shouldn't exist. That's what happened to the Morrison family. They found a place that wasn't supposed to be there, and they brought something back with them. David Morrison was 45 years old. He was a history teacher at a school in London. His wife Emma was 42. She worked as a nurse at a hospital. They had 2 kids. Lucy was 16 and liked to draw. Tom was 14 and liked video games. They were a normal family, a nice family, the kind of family nothing bad should happen to. Every October, when the kids had a week off from school, they went somewhere in Britain for vacation. Nothing fancy. They didn't have money for fancy. Just a little trip to spend time together as a family. That year, October of 2021, they rented a small house near the ocean in Cornwall. Cornwall is in the southwest part of England. It has beautiful beaches and big cliffs. The Morrison family had been there many times before. They knew all the walking paths. They knew all the beaches. They thought they knew everything about that area. They were wrong. On their 3rd day there, October 20th, the weather was very warm. Too warm for October. It felt like summer even though it was fall. They decided to take a walk along the cliffs. It was a walk they had done before. 5 miles from one beach to another and back. Easy. Safe. They'd done it 3 times before on other vacations. They started walking at 10 in the morning. The path was clear. Other people were walking too. Families with dogs, old couples holding hands. Everyone was enjoying the warm day. For 2 miles, everything was normal. They talked. They laughed. Tom complained about being tired. Lucy took pictures with her phone. Then Tom saw the path. It branched off from the main path they were on. It went down the cliff toward the ocean. The path was made of stone steps cut into the rock. There was an old rope to hold on to as you went down. The path looked old but well used, like people went down it all the time. "Dad, where does that path go?" Tom asked. David looked at his map. He looked at his phone. According to the map, there was no path there. According to his phone's GPS, that part of the cliff was solid rock. No paths, no beaches, nothing, but the path was right there. They could all see it. They could touch the rope. They could see the worn stone steps. It was real. "Maybe it's not on the tourist maps," Emma said. "Maybe it's a secret beach that only local people know about." They should have kept walking. David felt it in his stomach. That feeling you get when something is wrong, but the kids were already starting down the path. And Emma was curious too. So David followed. What else could he do? He couldn't let his family go without him. The path was longer than it looked. It went back and forth down the cliff face. Sometimes they couldn't see the ocean because of the bushes and rocks. The rope they were holding felt strange. It was old, really old. Not modern rope, but something handmade, covered in tar to protect it from rain. The kind of rope people used hundreds of years ago. It took 20 minutes to get to the bottom. When they finally stepped onto the beach, they all stopped and stared. This beach was wrong. The sand was white. Not normal British beach sand, which is usually brown or gray. This was white like snow. White like tropical beaches in the Caribbean. And it was warm. Not warm from the sun, but warm like it had heat coming from underneath it. Like something under the sand was producing heat. The kids took off their shoes right away and ran toward the water. But David was looking at the shells on the beach. They were huge. Some were as big as dinner plates. And they were shapes he'd never seen before. Spirals that seemed to move when you looked at them. Patterns that made your eyes water. Colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Emma picked up one of the shells. It was beautiful, like a rainbow trapped in stone, but holding it felt wrong. It was warm, warmer than the sand, and it was vibrating, just a little, like it was alive. I've never seen anything like this, Emma said, and she knew shells. She had collected them since she was a little girl. She had books about shells, but these shells were in no book she'd ever read. The water was wrong too. The ocean in Cornwall in October should be cold, maybe 55 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to make you gasp when you touch it. But when Lucy and Tom ran into the waves, they shouted that it was warm, like bathwater, and the color was wrong, not the gray-green of the Atlantic Ocean. This water was purple in some places, blue in others, green in others, colors that changed as you watched. They stayed on the beach for about an hour. The kids swam. David and Emma walked along the sand, looking at the strange shells. It should have been perfect, a secret beach all to themselves. But something was wrong. They all felt it, but didn't say it out loud. They felt watched, not by people. There was nobody else on the beach, but watched anyway. Like the beach itself had eyes, like it was studying them, learning about them, judging them. Lucy came out of the water first. She said she was cold, but that didn't make sense. The water was warm. But David saw her looking around nervously, looking behind rocks, looking up at the cliffs, looking for something, or someone. Tom came out next. He said the water felt weird. It's thick, he said, like swimming in honey, and it tingles on your skin. Then Emma saw the cave. At the far end of the beach, partly hidden by big rocks, was a cave entrance. It was perfectly round, like someone had cut it with a giant drill, and there was light coming from inside. Green light, soft and pulsing like a heartbeat. We should look inside, Tom said. No. David's voice was sharp, scared. We're leaving. Now. David couldn't explain why, but he knew that cave was dangerous. He knew it in his bones, in his blood. That cave was wrong. This whole beach was wrong. They needed to leave immediately. They gathered their things quickly. Emma tried to take one of the shells as a souvenir, but David made her put it back. He didn't know why, but he was certain that taking anything from this beach would be a terrible mistake. The walk back up the cliff was harder than coming down. The path seemed longer, steeper. The rope felt different too. It felt soft, warm, like it was made of something organic. Lucy said later that she felt it pulse under her hand, like it had a heartbeat. When they finally got back to the main path, they all turned to look back at the beach. The path was gone, not hidden. Not hard to see, gone. Where the path had been was solid rock and bushes. No steps, no rope, no sign that anyone had ever gone down there. David pushed through the bushes, getting scratched and cut, trying to find the path. But there was nothing, just cliff and rock and thorns, like the path had never existed at all. They walked back to their rental house in silence. Nobody wanted to talk about what had happened. That night, none of them could eat dinner. The kids went to bed early but couldn't sleep. They both had nightmares. Bad ones. Lucy dreamed about swimming in that purple-green water. In her dream, she swam down and found a city under the water. A city made of those impossible shells. The things that lived in the city weren't people. They weren't fish. They weren't anything that should exist, but they knew her name. They had been waiting for her. They had a room prepared for her in one of the shell houses. Tom dreamed about the cave. In his dream, he walked into the green light. The cave went deep into the earth. There were tunnels that led to other places, other beaches, other worlds. In his dream, he could hear his family calling him to come back, but something was pulling him deeper, something that whispered in a language that wasn't made of words. David and Emma had nightmares too, but they never told anyone what they dreamed about. Some things are too scary to say out loud. They went home 2 days early. They packed up and left Cornwall. But that wasn't the end of it. 3 months later, David got an email. There was no name on it, no subject, just a photo attached. David opened the photo. It was his family on that impossible beach. The photo was taken from far away. Maybe from the cliff, maybe from somewhere else, but you could see them clearly. David and Emma looking at shells, Lucy and Tom in the water. But they weren't alone in the photo. There were things in the water behind the kids. Tall shapes that might have been people if people were 7 feet tall and had too many joints in their arms. And in the cave entrance, barely visible in the shadows, something was standing, watching, waiting. David tried to trace the email. He had a friend who worked with computers look at it, but the email didn't really exist. David could see it on his computer, but there was no data, no evidence it had been sent. It was impossible. But the photo was real. They moved to Canada 6 months later. They wanted to be as far from the ocean as possible. They live in the middle of the country now, hundreds of miles from any beach. But it doesn't matter. Lucy still dreams about swimming. Tom still feels the pull of that cave. And sometimes, on warm days, they all smell the ocean. Not normal ocean smell. The smell of that impossible beach. Sweet and salty and wrong. David still has the photo. He's only shown it to a few people. In the photo, you can see his family clearly. But if you look very carefully, you can see something else. Their shadows are wrong. The sun is directly overhead in the photo, so their shadows should be small. But their shadows are long, very long. And the shadows are reaching toward the ocean, being pulled toward the water. And at the end of each shadow, where it meets the waves, there's another shadow. A shadow rising up from the water to meet theirs. Like something under the water is reaching for them, claiming them. The Morrison family got away from that beach, but David doesn't think they really escaped. He thinks part of them is still there. On a beach that shouldn't exist, in a place that's not on any map. And someday, that part will call the rest of them back. Because places like that don't just let you go. They mark you. They change you. They make you part of them, and no matter how far you run, no matter where you hide, you can never really leave. The beach is still there, somewhere on the coast of Cornwall, waiting for someone else to find that path, waiting for another family to walk on that warm white sand, waiting to add more shadows to its collection. Story: The Last Surfer. Marcus thought he was special. He thought the ocean loved him. 24 years old. Surfing since he was 6. He could read the waves like other people read books. He knew every break, every current, every mood of the sea. He'd been in the water with sharks and wasn't scared. He'd been caught in rips that killed other surfers and survived. The ocean had tested him many times. He always won. But the ocean wasn't testing him. It was preparing him. It was December 15th, 2022. Marcus was in Gold Coast, Australia for a big surfing competition. But the competition was cancelled that day. The waves were too big, too dangerous. 8-foot monsters that would crush anyone who tried to ride them. The judges said it was too risky. The insurance companies said no way. Marcus was angry. He had driven 10 hours to get there. He had trained for months. And now they were just sitting on the beach like tourists? Like scared little kids? No. Marcus didn't come all this way to sit on the sand. At 7 in the evening, when everyone else had gone home, Marcus decided to paddle out. Just for fun, he told his friend Jake. Just to feel the power of those waves. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange. Perfect light for the camera Jake always carried. Jake tried to stop him. "Mate, this is stupid. Look at those waves. They'll kill you." Marcus just laughed. "The ocean loves me," he said. "We understand each other." The ocean was about to show Marcus how wrong he was. Jake filmed Marcus paddling out. The waves were huge, walls of white water that looked like buildings falling down. Marcus had to dive under them, holding his breath as tons of water passed over him. It took him 20 minutes to get past the breaking waves to the calm water beyond. Most people would have been too tired to continue. Marcus was just getting started. The first few waves Marcus caught were perfect. Jake's camera recorded everything. Marcus dropping down the face of waves bigger than houses, carving turns that shouldn't be possible. The sunset made the water look like liquid gold. It was the kind of surfing people dream about. Then everything changed. The water temperature dropped, not slowly, all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. Marcus said later it went from comfortable to freezing in 1 second. His wetsuit was good, but not good enough for water that cold. He could feel his muscles getting tight, his fingers going numb. Then the waves stopped, not got smaller, stopped completely. One moment, 8-foot waves everywhere. The next moment flat, completely flat, like a lake. No wind, no current, nothing moving at all. Jake was filming from the beach. In his video, you can see it happen. 1 second, Marcus is sitting in huge waves. The next second, the ocean is perfectly still. It's impossible. Oceans don't do that. There's always movement. Always. But not now. Now the water was so still that Marcus could see his reflection. Then Marcus saw the other surfer. About 50 yards away, there was another person on a surfboard. Just sitting there, facing away from Marcus, looking at the horizon. Marcus hadn't seen him paddle out. 1 second empty ocean, the next second this guy was there. "Hey!" Marcus shouted. "Did you see that?" The waves just died. The other surfer didn't answer, didn't move, just sat there perfectly still. Too still. When you're on a surfboard, you're always moving a little bit, balancing, adjusting. But this guy was like a statue. Marcus paddled closer. The water felt wrong now, thick, like oil. His board moved through it too easily, like the water wasn't really water anymore, and it was getting darker. Not just because the sun was setting, the water itself was turning black. When Marcus got close to the other surfer, he stopped. Something was very wrong. The guy's wetsuit was old, really old, like from the 1960s, and he was too still. Nobody sits that still. "Hey mate, you okay?" Marcus called. The surfer turned his head. Just his head. The rest of his body didn't move. Marcus screamed. The face wasn't human anymore. Maybe it had been once, but not now. The skin was gray-green like a corpse that had been in water too long. Things were growing out of it. Barnacles, seaweed, coral. The eyes were gone. Just black holes that went deep into the skull. And the mouth was open, too wide, showing rows and rows of teeth. Sharp teeth, fish teeth, shark teeth. Too many teeth for any mouth. Marcus knew who it was. It was Tommy Nakamura, a local surfer who had disappeared 3 months ago. Just paddled out one morning and never came back. Everyone thought he had drowned. But he hadn't drowned. He had become something else. Tommy's mouth moved. Sounds came out. Not words, clicking and whistling like a dolphin. Like a whale, like something trying to speak but forgetting how human voices work. Then Tommy slipped off his board into the water. But he didn't sink. He stood on the water, walked on it like it was solid ground, walking toward Marcus. Marcus tried to paddle away, but his board wouldn't move. The water around him had become even thicker, like tar, like glue. He was stuck. Then Marcus saw the others, under the water. Dozens of them. All surfers, all in different stages of change. Some looked almost normal except for their black eyes. Others were mostly coral and barnacles in the shape of people. They were all moving toward him, walking on the water or just under it, reaching up with hands that had too many fingers, or no fingers, or fingers that were tentacles now. Jake saw all this from the beach. His camera shows dark shapes surrounding Marcus. You can hear Marcus screaming, see him trying to paddle. Then Jake started running toward the water, shouting, splashing into the shallows. That saved Marcus. Jake's noise, his movement, it broke whatever was happening. The water became liquid again. The waves came back all at once. Huge waves that would have killed most people. But Marcus rode one. Rode it like his life depended on it. Because it did, he came flying into shore. His board hit the beach so hard it cracked in half. Jake grabbed him, pulled him up the beach, away from the water. They looked back at the ocean. The transformed surfers were standing in the shallow water, waist deep, watching. Their faces were all wrong. Human features mixed with sea creature parts. Some had eyes on the sides of their heads now. Some had gills on their necks. Some had skin that looked like scales. Then a wave came and they were gone. Like they had never been there at all. Marcus was taken to the hospital. His body temperature was dangerously low, 90 degrees. He should have been dead. He spent 3 days there, most of it unconscious. When he was awake, he talked about the surfers, about how they wanted him to join them, how the ocean had chosen him. Nobody believed him except Jake. Jake had the video, but it was dark and shaky. You could see shapes in the water. You could hear Marcus screaming, but it wasn't clear enough to prove anything. Marcus did research when he got out of the hospital. He found out that surfers had been disappearing from that beach for 50 years. Always good surfers, always in big waves, always around sunset. The locals had a name for it. They called it the gathering tide. They said the ocean collects the best surfers, keeps them, changes them, makes them into something new, something that serves the sea. Marcus never surfed again. He sold all his boards, moved to Alice Springs in the middle of Australia, as far from the ocean as possible, but even there he's not free. On quiet nights he hears waves that aren't there, feels the pull of the ocean calling him back. And in his dreams, he's back on that black water. But in his dreams he doesn't escape. In his dreams, he slips off his board and stands on the water with the others. And it feels good. It feels right. It feels like what he was always meant to become. The beach is still there. Surfers still go there. Most don't know the story, but some do. The ones who've been surfing long enough. They know to get out of the water before sunset. They know that when the waves are biggest, when conditions are perfect, that's when the ocean is hungry. That's when it's looking for new surfers to add to its collection. Every surfer feels it eventually. That pull to paddle out when you shouldn't. That voice that says the waves are perfect even when they're deadly. Most resist it. Some don't. Marcus resisted. Barely. But he knows the ocean is patient. It's been collecting surfers for thousands of years. It can wait. And one day, when Marcus is weak, when he's sad, when he misses the water too much, he'll go back. He'll paddle out at sunset in big waves. And this time, Jake won't be there to save him. This time, he'll join the gathering tide. Story 5. The Beach House Inheritance. Rachel had worked her whole life. Every day, every weekend. She was 35 and had never taken a real vacation. She didn't have time for fun. She didn't have time for relationships. She only had time for work. So when the letter came saying her great-aunt Millicent had died and left her a beach house, Rachel thought her life was finally changing for the better. She was wrong. So very wrong. Rachel had only met Aunt Millicent once. She was 10 years old at a family reunion. She remembered a strange old woman who smelled like the ocean even though they were hundreds of miles from any beach. Millicent had grabbed Rachel's hand and whispered to her, "The ocean remembers everything, child. Every ship that sank, every person who drowned, every secret ever told to the waves. It keeps them all, and sometimes it gives them back." Rachel hadn't understood what that meant. She was just a kid. But 25 years later, standing in Millicent's beach house, she was about to learn exactly what her aunt meant. The house was in North Carolina, right on the beach in a place called Corolla. It was worth at least $2 million, maybe more, 3 stories tall with big windows facing the ocean. Rachel couldn't believe it was hers now. She drove down from Richmond on March 10th, 2023. She was planning to stay for a long weekend, look around, decide if she wanted to sell it or keep it. The house was old but beautiful, built in the 1920s. Everything inside was antique. Old furniture, old paintings, and shells. Thousands and thousands of shells. They were everywhere. On every table, on every shelf, covering entire walls. Big shells, small shells. Shells in colors Rachel had never seen before. But the strangest thing was the photographs. One wall of the living room was covered with them. Hundreds of photos, all of the ocean, but they were all taken from the same spot. The same exact view from the master bedroom window. Each photo had a date written on the back. One photo for each day, going back years and years. The last photo was dated March 1st, 9 days before Millicent died. That first night, Rachel found Millicent's journals. Dozens of them. Books filled with Millicent's handwriting. Rachel thought they might be about family history. Maybe they would explain why Millicent left her the house. So she started reading. She wished she hadn't. The early journals were normal. Millicent wrote about buying the house in 1978 after her husband died. She wrote about fixing it up, about learning to live alone, about finding peace by the ocean. Normal stuff, sad but normal. But then, around 1985, the writing changed. The things Millicent wrote about became strange, scary. I saw them again last night. They stand at the edge of the water when there's no moon. They're waiting for something. Or someone. I don't know what they want. The shells are talking to me. If you hold them to your ear, you don't hear the ocean. You hear voices. People calling for help. People who drowned. They're not at peace. They're angry. So angry, it spoke to me today. Not in words. In feelings. In pictures in my mind. It's old. Older than the land. Older than anything. It's been waiting so long. And it's so hungry. Rachel thought maybe Millicent had gone crazy. Old people living alone sometimes do. But the entries were too detailed. Too specific. And then Rachel found the photographs from 1987. Not of the ocean during the day. Of the beach at night. In the photos, you could see things in the water. Tall shapes that might be people. But people aren't 7 feet tall. People don't have arms that bend in 3 places. People don't stand in the ocean at 3 in the morning. Rachel should have left right then. Packed her stuff and driven home. But it was late. She was tired. And surely these were just the fantasies of a lonely old woman. Surely. That night, Rachel heard the singing. It started at 2 in the morning. Woke her from deep sleep. It sounded like hundreds of people singing together, but not in any language she knew. The singing was coming from the beach, from the water. Rachel went to the window. The same window Millicent had taken all those photos from. The beach looked empty at first, but then she saw the water was glowing. Soft blue-white light pulsing with the rhythm of the singing. And there were shapes in the waves. People-shaped things standing in the water, swaying back and forth with the current. She grabbed her phone to record it, but the screen went black. Not dead. Black. Like something was covering the camera. When she looked back at the water, everything was normal. Dark ocean. White foam. Nothing else. The next morning, Rachel found more journals. These were hidden in the attic. They weren't Millicent's. They belonged to the people who owned the house before her. And the people before them. And the people before them. Going back to when the house was built. Everyone who had lived in this house had seen things, heard things, and they had all written about it. Obsessively, desperately. Like they needed to document it. Like they needed proof that they weren't going crazy. The house wasn't just built by the ocean. It was connected to the ocean. One journal called it a window between worlds. The things in the water could see into the house. And if you stayed in the house long enough, you started to see them. Really see them. Not just glimpses. You saw what they really were. And once you started seeing them, you couldn't leave. Not because they stopped you, but because you didn't want to leave. The visions were terrifying at first. But then they became beautiful. Then they became necessary. Like a drug you couldn't quit. Every person who had owned this house had died here. Every single one. Rachel packed immediately. She had to get out. But when she tried to start her car, it wouldn't work. Dead battery. She called for a tow truck. They said they couldn't come. The roads were flooded from a storm. But there was no storm. The sky was clear and blue. She called a taxi. The dispatcher said they didn't service that area. She called Uber. The app said no drivers were available. She even tried to rent a bicycle from a shop in town. They said they were all rented out. Everything that could help her leave wasn't working. She was trapped. That second night, the singing was louder. And now Rachel could see them clearly. Hundreds of them standing in the shallow water. From far away, they looked like people. But up close, everything was wrong. Their skin was see-through. She could see dark veins under it pulsing with blue light. Their eyes were too big. All black, no whites at all. And their mouths never closed. Always open. Always singing. Rachel realized she was humming along. The melody was in her head now. She couldn't get it out. It was beautiful. The most beautiful thing she had ever heard. She found herself walking downstairs. Opening the door, walking onto the deck. Her feet moved without her control. Down the stairs. Onto the sand. Toward the water. The things in the ocean turned to look at her. All at once, hundreds of black eyes focusing on her. They raised their arms, welcoming her. Rachel could hear their thoughts now. Feel their hunger. They had been waiting for her. The house had been calling her family for generations. Millicent had held them off for 45 years by documenting them, by watching them, by refusing to give in. But Millicent was dead now. And they were so hungry, Rachel was at the water's edge. The waves touched her feet. The water was warm even though it was March, even though it should be freezing. The things in the water were beautiful now. How had she thought they were scary? They were angels. They were truth. They were what humans were meant to become. She took a step into the water, then another. The water was around her knees now. The singing was everything. She was singing too, her mouth opening wider than it should, wider than human mouths can open. Then she heard car horns, loud and long, then shouting. "Flashlights on the beach! Rachel Winters! Your office sent us to check on you." The spell broke. Rachel gasped, stumbled backward, fell onto the sand. The things in the water hissed, a sound like steam, like anger. They sank below the waves, but their eyes stayed above the surface. Watching, waiting. 2 police officers helped her to their car. Her assistant had called them when Rachel didn't answer emails for 2 days. The officers drove her to a hotel in town. Rachel tried to explain what happened, but she sounded insane, even to herself. The next morning, Rachel didn't want to leave. The pull was too strong. She needed to go back to the house. Needed to see them again. The officers had to physically put her in her car. She screamed the whole way home. Rachel spent a month in a psychiatric hospital. The doctors said she had a mental breakdown from stress. They gave her medicine. The medicine made the singing quieter, made the pull weaker, but it never went away completely. She tried to sell the house without going back. The buyer was a developer who wanted to tear it down and build condos. Rachel thought that would end it, break the connection. 2 months later, the developer was dead. He drowned in 3 inches of water in the house's bathroom. The construction crew refused to go back. They said the house was haunted. They heard singing. They saw lights in the water. They found wet footprints in rooms that had been locked for days. The house is still there. Still for sale. The price keeps dropping, but no one will buy it. The locals know about it now. They call it the Siren House. They say if you walk past it at night, you can see lights in the windows even though the power was cut off years ago. You can hear singing even though no one lives there. Rachel still owns it. She can't sell it. She can't destroy it. And she can't go back. Because she knows if she goes back, she'll never leave. She'll walk into the ocean and become one of those things. One of those beautiful, terrible things that sing in the darkness. She takes medicine every day to keep the singing out of her head. But the medicine is becoming less effective. The pull is getting stronger. Every night, the dreams are more vivid. In her dreams, she's back at the house, walking down to the water, joining them in their endless song. It's not a question of if she'll go back. It's just a question of when. The house is waiting. The ocean is waiting. And when she finally gives in, when she finally goes home, she'll walk into those warm waves and never come back out. The transformation will hurt at first. Her lungs will fill with water. Her skin will become transparent. Her eyes will turn black. But then it will feel good. It will feel right. She'll be home. Really home. Part of something ancient and hungry and patient. Part of the ocean that remembers everything. I've told you these 5 stories because they're true. Every word, every detail, every impossible thing. They all really happened. I've changed the names to protect the people involved, but everything else is exactly as it occurred. The ocean is not our friend. It's not our enemy either. It's something else, something that doesn't care about us at all. We're just food to it, or entertainment. Or maybe we're something it's collecting, like a child collects shells on a beach. Next time you go to the ocean, remember these stories. When you hear singing in the waves, don't listen. When you see lights under the water, look away. When you find a place that feels wrong, leave immediately. Don't be curious. Don't be brave. Just leave, because the ocean is patient. It's been here for billions of years. It'll be here long after we're gone. And it's hungry. Always hungry. Waiting for the next person to wander too close. Waiting for the next person to hear its song. Maybe that person will be you. Sweet dreams.